Welcome. It is my great privilege to get to welcome Nayaswamis Jyotish and Devi to Palo Alto this evening. And I was just thinking about the phrase as I was watching our temple fill up, absence makes the heart grow stronger, because it's been a little over 2 years since we've had these great souls in our temple with us. And while we as yogis know that time and space are relative, I know that I speak on behalf of everyone here when I say our hearts are just brimming over with joy to have both of you here in the temple with us today. So thank you for being here. Nayaswamis Jyotish and Devi are the spiritual directors of Ananda worldwide, and they have dedicated the last 50 years of their life, just over 50 years of their life, all of their adult life, to serving these teachings, to sharing the teachings of self-realization through their discipleship to this great yoga master, Paramahansa Yogananda, through their devotion to God, through their wisdom, their joy, their attunement, and most importantly, through their love and their friendship to each one of us. When I think of these great souls, joy is one of the first words that come to mind. They are true emissaries of the light, and we have the great blessing of getting to share that with them today. They've spent the last, all of their adult life being trained by Swami Kriyananda to share this vibration of truth. And we have that opportunity to absorb that vibration today, to be a part of that wave of grace that is the legacy of Swami Kriyananda through our discipleship and through the example of their discipleship that they have shared with each one of us. So without further ado, I welcome Nayaswamis Jyotish and Devi up to the stage.
Thank you, and certainly that feeling of missing each other is resonated in our hearts too. It really is a joy to be here and to be able to be together again.
And it's very moving, actually. This is our first foray out from Ananda Village since March 2020. So we were driving down, we were telling some of our friends this morning, and it was, I felt a little bit like Alice in Wonderland, It's like, oh, look at all the buildings and the cars, and it's just a joy to be with all of you. And to begin, and this is what we'll be talking about this evening, how do we rebuild our lives with attunement and energy and joy through what the world, what Palo Alto, what each of us as individuals have gone through in this last year and a half. It's taken its toll on all of us. And yet, we have tools to actually use this very much to our advantage. So without further ado, Jyotish will offer a prayer.
I'll offer a prayer. Please stand. Heavenly Father, Divine Mother, friend, beloved God, great masters, Jesus Christ, Babaji Krishna, Lahiri Mahashaya, Swami Sri Yukteswar, beloved Guru, Paramahansa Yogananda Ji, saints of all religions, we humbly bow to you all. Beloved Lord, fill us with thy wisdom, thy light and thy love. Fill us with thy energy, and help us be channels to bring thy light to everyone. Om. Peace. Amen. Please be seated. So we'll have a chant and then a brief meditation, and then we'll proceed.
And also welcome to everyone online who's joining us.
Yes.
Joy, 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 ever new joy, 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 joy.
Let's meditate just briefly, but bring your consciousness to the point between the eyebrows and bring it into the here and now.
So we'd like to invite our singers up now.
When the dawn breaks and then the morning sends the sun high in the sky, who would hide from heaven's glory? Who would pass the challenge by? La 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 la.
There's a morning for every nation when the sun's high in the sky. There's a time for every people to affirm their destiny. La 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 even so, all of us together can create a better land. Live the past, a new tomorrow waits for all who understand. There's a morning for every nation when the sun's high in the sky. There's a time for every people to affirm their destiny. La 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 la. La 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 la. La 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 la. La 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 la. Even so, all of us together can create a better land. Live the past, a new tomorrow waits for all who understand. La 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 la. La 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 la. Leave the past, a new tomorrow waits for all who understand. Some men call it progress, down with those who doubt. To join with causes others join and shout when others shout. Come, you're a man, no passive stone. Stand up and call your soul your own. Go on alone, go on alone. Banish weakness, go on alone. Go on alone, go on alone. Don't look back, just go on alone. Some men lack the daring ever to be free. They shun the heights and crowd the depths and court security. Come, you're a man, no passive stone. Stand up and call your soul your own. Go on alone, go on alone. Banish weakness, go on alone. Go on alone.
Coward see but pride in
singularity. Oh, never mind if men are wrong, so long as they agree. Come, you're a man, no passive stone. Stand up and call your soul your own. Go on alone, go on alone. Banish weakness, go on alone. Go on alone, go on alone. Don't look back, just go on alone.
claim the power within you.
Error to defy. The world may change or disappear, but truth can never die. Come, you're a man, no passive stone. Stand up and call your soul your own. Go on alone, go on alone. Banish weakness, go on alone. Go on alone, go on alone. Don't look back, just go on alone.
Thank you. That was not only beautiful, but appropriate. You know, tonight we're going to talk on the theme of we are energy, how to raise our energy. And Master wouldn't even start a lecture until the energy was raised. So, Swami said that in the early years, he would come running onto the stage with his long hair flowing out behind him. And then, as we repeat on Sundays, he would say, "And how feels everyone?" And everyone would shout back, "Awake and ready." So he wouldn't even begin to talk. I might manage the running on stage. I'm not sure about the long hair flowing out behind. But that's why Swami always insisted or had the practice of starting with music, because it raises the energy. And until the energy is raised, until we have a flow of energy, nothing is going to happen. So the theme, the thought of we are energy, don't feel like that makes you special, because everything is energy. Lahiri Mahashaya said something very interesting. You know, the traditional definition of God is Satchidananda, existence, consciousness, and bliss. He gave a different definition, not that it was really different, just another alternative. He said that God is prana, and he defined prana as intelligent energy. So think of God's existence as intelligent energy. And he said that has two states. The first state is that it's calm and centered within itself. And then in that state, there's no outward creation. It's just self-contained. But he said that God takes a little portion of that consciousness. He said 1%. I love those percentages somehow. Anyway, he said 1%, and he makes that calm energy dynamic energy, that prana, dynamic prana, or dynamic intelligent energy. And it's that which creates the universe. So he, as we know from our teachings, he sets that pure, still consciousness into vibration. And that's why we chant Om or Amen. It is the word that symbolizes, signifies that movement of energy, the vibrational aspect of energy. And so with that projection of that energy out, that's what creates the universe. But Swami gave a really interesting talk at one time about how Kriya accelerates our spiritual growth. Well worth listening to. On you can get it on from Treasures which are the collected talks of Swami. But he said that with that projection out, what's really going on is at the farthest reaches, the consciousness, it isn't just the energy, is lessened. The consciousness is lessened. And so first there's what we think of is inert matter, the stones, the grounded energy. And as it says in the Vedas, God sleeps in the rocks. And so in that state, there is not much movement of energy. The next state, it's like it isn't just a rock gradually moves up and becomes the next thing. There's a whole octave jump. And so the next octave is in the plant kingdom. And so it also follows the chakras, for those of you who know about the chakras, which is most of you. So in the plant kingdom, life begins to come. Life begins to express. So that, as it says in the scriptures, God dreams in the plants, sleeps in the rock, dreams in the plants. But what distinguishes plants, the plant kingdom, from the rock kingdom, is a rock can't reproduce itself or reproduce copies of itself. In the plants, the aspect of reproduction comes in, but it's still quite limited in many, many things. The next stage, the next octave up, is the animal kingdom, and there's more. One can't really say more energy, but more ability to express the energy. And in the animal kingdom, we come to the ability to move around under our own control, to have mobility, and the senses become much more active. And then there's another octave jump, which, now this is really interesting. I found it really interesting. I think you will too. Master said that what differentiates man from the animal kingdom is that the chakras become active enough in mankind. That's the special dispensation or special creation. The body follows an evolutionary process from the animals, but the nervous system, and especially the spinal, the astral nervous system, now becomes awakened enough so that we can express divinity through it. But Swami said something else. What chakra comes after, the animal kingdom represents the third chakra, where dynamic self-will or control, that's being expressed. What comes next in the chakra system? The heart. And Swami said what differentiates man from the animals is that our heart energy becomes awakened. And we get this kind of dual blessing and curse, good news and bad news, that our heart energy is awakened, but the heart energy now, under some degree of our control, it can go down and out into the world, or it can be withdrawn and lifted up to the higher chakras. And that's what brings about enlightenment. And so the special gift that we have as humans is that our heart energy is awakened. That's why Sri Yukteswar said, nothing can be done without love. It's why Patanjali said, Yoga Strita Vritti Nirod. Yoga, or union with God, is the neutralization of the restlessness of the heart, or the likes and dislikes. So that we have to now, as human beings, we have to work with our heart energy. But it all comes back to energy. Without the movement, without the flow of energy, nothing's going to happen. It's like the ship is just stuck in the water. You can steer a ship that's under movement, but if the ship is just there, the engine is dead and it's not moving, you can turn the rudder all you want and it's not going to make any difference. So the first thing in our spiritual life and in life in general is we have to get our energy moving. And the more we can get that energy moving, then the more we're going to be able to find our own divinity, because energy and consciousness, they're linked together. This whole evolutionary flow is not just greater expression of energy, but most importantly, greater expression of consciousness. But energy and consciousness are intimately linked together. So we've got to get our energy flowing in order to raise our consciousness. But another thing that is helpful to remember is that we don't create either energy or consciousness. That's God's job. He does that. All of life depends on the sun up there shining on the earth. We don't create the sun. We don't create the sun's rays. It just is a gift of energy that is flowing to us. So if we could see, our senses basically are here to give us the big lie, to make us think that what we see and hear, that's reality, that the physical world is the end of reality and is all that exists. And so as we begin to awaken, one of the first things that the spiritual path teaches us is that this world is not what it seems. You're looking at me, I'm looking at you. It looks like I'm solid. It looks like, you can see the colors, you can see the movement and so on. But what are you really seeing? What are you really perceiving? All it is a whole vast ocean of vibrational energy. You're perceiving wavelengths of energy, and your discrimination, your mind is somehow being able to take all of that mixture of vibrational energy and make sense out of it. But in doing that, you lose the vastness of all the rest of the vibrational energy. But the senses work, one could say, by not by opening up the world to us, but by clamping it down sufficiently so that we can kind of function in this life. But our brains, we think, the brains are what creates consciousness. It's almost the other way around. Our brains are what govern or tamp down consciousness so that we can move around and play our parts in this world. I've read something really interesting a while back. You've all heard of savants. Sometimes they used to call them idiot savants. It would be people who have extraordinary abilities but don't function very well. The Rain Man, if any of you saw the movie of The Rain Man, he didn't function very well, but he knew the schedule of every train, every flight, everything. He knew all of those facts, but he didn't function in the world very well. So somebody once asked him if he knew Lincoln's Gettysburg Address, and he said, "Oh yes," and he gave the literal address of where Lincoln stayed when he visited Gettysburg. But the reason I bring it up is, we think, he was just born with those kind of extraordinary abilities and extraordinary deficits. But there's something called traumatic savants. Somebody who's gone through a trauma and all of a sudden has great abilities. There was a man who had a fall and a severe concussion, was in a coma for about a week, and when he woke up from that coma, he never having played an instrument, you'll like this, Keshava, never having played an instrument, could play by ear any song that he had ever heard, flawlessly. And he had other mathematical abilities. A number of things happened. But what's the takeaway from that? It's an interesting story, of course, but what's the takeaway from that? He didn't suddenly learn all of that music. He knew that somehow, but somehow that fall took the governor away from his brain, and now he could express what he knew. So one could say that partly the whole expression of the spiritual path is to get rid of the governors on our consciousness. But that begins with the flow of energy. The energy flow has to get increasingly strong. Swami, who really was a genius, I mean, you know, he expressed that level of creativity. He said the difference between a genius and a normal person is that a genius has more energy in their brain. You've probably all dreamt at night, and you see at night as if you're watching a picture. And then you've meditated and you've tried to visualize the masters. Why can't you visualize the masters when we're awake in as great a detail as you can create a dream world at night? Master said it's because at night the energy has withdrawn from the senses, which is, one might say, sapping it up. It's withdrawn from the senses into the spine and up into the brain, and because of that extra energy, when the images come, they come clear and bright and real and as if there's a whole world. So if that's, I'm not saying we should go to sleep and not meditate. Master called that counterfeit samadhi. But it points to the reality that when our brains get more energy in them, they become awakened and aware. And Master also said that if we can visualize something clearly enough and strongly enough and then hold that visualization, takes a lot of energy, withdrawal of energy and bringing it up, having that energy in our brain. If we can do that, we can manifest that in the outer world. So the outer world isn't the final determinator. Our consciousness is. And energy in our consciousness is there. But as this whole universe started, we don't create the energy. We live in a vast sea of energy that is completely available to us. And all we have to do is begin to be channels for that greater energy. So really our job as devotees or as people trying to live even a worldly successful life is to channel more and more energy and to be able to focus that energy. So in order to awaken spiritually, first of all, we have to get the energy flowing. Well, how do we do that? Well, surprise, surprise, Master had solutions for that one too. So he gave us certain laws of energy. He said the greater the will or willingness, the greater the flow of energy. So whatever we undertake can be anything. It can be a worldly pursuit. It can be meditation. It can be anything whatsoever. The first law of doing that successfully is to have enthusiasm for it. So in our meditations, in our spiritual life, in our friendships, in our work, in our hobbies, be enthusiastic. The first title for the first album that Swami's music that he ever made, the first title he used was Say Yes to Life, with yes, capital Y-E-S, with a big exclamation mark with it. Say yes to life. So whatever we're doing, say yes to it. And the more we say yes to it, the more the energy will flow in the direction that whatever we choose. If it's music, we'll be better musicians. If it's business, we'll be better businessmen. Whatever we direct that to, it will flourish. And if we don't direct it, it will gradually wither. And there's also a law of inertia, so that things become less and less energetic over time. They gradually lose energy until, water starting in a hillside gradually comes down. It's very dynamic. It can erode hillsides, dig huge canyons. But at the end of it all, it sits still in a flat thing unless outside forces are acting on it. So we have to keep channeling our energy. We have to keep moving it. And that takes willingness. Then the other thing about intelligent prana, which is what we're talking about, the energy flow. The other thing about it is that as that energy flow moves, it creates a magnetic vortex around it. You take a wire, you send energy through it, and it creates magnetism around that. What that means, Master said that, this Dwapara Yuga is the age of energy, where we're going to learn to manipulate energy, not just electricity. Master called that the animal form of energy, but gradually we'll work with more and more subtle forms, which is what's working in our spine with meditation. It isn't just electricity. There's a physical, chemical flow of, one could call it electricity, through our physical nervous system, but our chakras work on more subtle energetic levels. Anyway, during this period of time, we will learn to move, Dwapara Yuga meaning, we'll learn to work with and manipulate energy. But we can look around us. The world is vastly, vastly different than it was a few hundred years ago, because now we've come into the age of energy, and with energy, space begins to disappear. You need no better example of that than if one of you had forgotten to turn off your cell phone and it rang. That ring, you don't know where that's coming from. Could be coming from somebody down the street, or it could be coming from somebody in India across the world. You don't even know. It doesn't matter. You just answer, and there it is. So that space differentiation has disappeared to a certain extent, not completely yet. We're at the very beginning. But this age of energy is going to create, at its ultimate, an age of consciousness, and then it will work on magnetism. But we don't have time in a short talk like tonight to go into it. But Master said that the whole of the world functions on magnetism. The stronger the flow of energy, the stronger our magnetism. That's why attunement with a saint or attunement with a guru is so completely determinative of our spiritual progress. Swami said that to the general public, Master talked about how to attract your perfect mate, how to be successful in business, many, many things. To the disciples, he talked about attunement, and that was basically it. Well, why? Because a master, like Master, a true guru, not only has a flow of energy that is universal. It's the difference between a copper wire and a superconductor. Copper wire, you try to put very much energy through it and it burns up. That's how the toaster works. The resistance of that wire makes it hot. And so our nervous system, if we try to put too much energy through the nervous system, it gets hot. Master, with a couple of disciples, would just get near them or touch them and say, hot, hot, like that. So he could feel that resistance of their nervous system. But a master is a superconductor. There is no resistance of ego. And so the enormous flow of energy through a master creates a magnetic field in the direction of enlightenment. There can be other people who have a lot of energy flowing in some direction, but their magnetism may be something that we don't want to get near, that we don't even want to be around, because it will take us away from our path. But the Guru, if what we're seeking is God, then the Guru will magnetize us into that. We were present in India one time when a newspaper reporter came to interview Swamiji. And the reporter, a couple of questions into the interview, said, "Does everyone need a guru?" And we naturally expected Swami to give the traditional organizational answer. Well, yes, you do. No, he said, no, you don't need a guru. Why would you have to have a guru? Why would you have to have somebody telling you what to do? Why would you do that? You don't need a guru unless you want to find God. Then, of course, you need a guru. And then he went on with the explanation. But see, for those of us who want more energy, more consciousness, more uplifted, expanded consciousness, a master has the magnetism and the flow that will get us there. And that's why being around a master, opening ourselves to them, is really important. It's why it would be helpful. I know we're gradually beginning to come out of the separation of COVID and the enforced separation. It's wonderful to be able to gather together and be together like this. But we have to watch out for the fact that during this time of separation, it has also to a certain extent allowed us to participate as mere observers. You can stay at home, you don't have to travel, you don't even have to get out of your pajamas, you can go to Sunday service, you can kind of tune in, not tune in, you can get a cup of coffee. But that lower state of energy does not produce the same kind of consciousness. So we have to put out more energy and more flow of energy in order to raise our consciousness so that Master can come running onto the stage of our consciousness, and give us the teachings. Now, the teachings of a Master are often kind of confounding to the logical mind. There's a beautiful story of Ananda Ma, who there was a disciple, and he's telling the story. And he was a disciple of her, and in the early years of his discipleship, she would travel kind of incessantly. And he began to think, well, I'm really attracted to her and to be with her, but why is she so restless? Why can't she even be in one place for any length of time? And so one time she was traveling to this kind of lake district, and she invited him to come along. Of course, these great masters are working with us all the time. Invited him to come along, and they were there for a day or two. And then one morning she said, let's have a picnic out by the lake. And so the disciples, they made lunch and they packed it up and they had a blanket and they walked some distance and they came to the lake and they spread everything out and got the food ready. And just as they were about to sit down, Anandamoyi Ma said, "We must go." And this man, he went ballistic. I mean, is she so restless she can't even have lunch? I can't even have lunch if I'm going to, that's what was behind it all. Anyway, she said, "We have to go." And she didn't even wait for them to pack up. She just started walking. And so she walked and she came to a tree, and a little bird up in the tree fell out of the tree and fell at her feet. And she had a young boy with her. She said, "Please pick the bird up and hold it up to me." And the boy held it up. The bird looked into Anandamoyi's eyes and kind of flapped its wings and then died. And then Ma said, "The soul of that bird called me to come here because it wanted darshan at the end." Maybe it was a yogi who was incarnated in that form. I don't know. But and this restless disciple, hearing that, understood, oh, there's a whole nother thing going on here, that Ma is functioning at another level of consciousness. And I shouldn't, from my lower level, be judging that. And so for all of us, there are so many, many things that we don't yet understand and won't understand from the level of consciousness which is still circumscribed by the senses and by desires and by the heart's energy, the dynamic prana, the intelligent energy of God, still expressing its kind of outward flow. Only when we get that internalized and brought up into the upper chakras, especially the spiritual eye, will we be filled with enough energy to raise our consciousness to the point where we can become unified with God, which is the end point of all of the reason for existence. This whole drama back to the rocks, Master said that he could remember back to when he was a diamond, his incarnations. I've often laughed, well, he was a diamond, I was a chunk of coal back at that time. But, nonetheless, this whole drama is really a drama of increasing expression of that dynamic prana which expands and uplifts and creates greater and greater consciousness until our consciousness literally becomes infinite. And that's the state of samadhi. And Master described it as ever new, ever expansive, ever creative joy in that state. But it all begins by us being willing channels, saying yes to life, living with enthusiasm. And so anything in your life that's blocking your flow of energy, try to overcome that and get a movement of energy first. Get the little motorboat of your life moving, and then you can steer it toward God. God bless you.
Thank you, Jyotish. Well, good evening, everyone, and I'll share some thoughts with you as well. In Master's beautiful poem, God, 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 which Swamiji set to music, it begins, "From the depths of slumber, as I ascend the spiral staircase of wakefulness, I will whisper, God, God, God." But the concept that I want to focus on is from the depths of slumber as we ascend the spiral staircase of wakefulness. And as we were speaking earlier, as Jyotish was speaking, that God sleeps in the rocks and minerals, dreams in the plants, starts to awaken in the animals, and has the potential to be fully awake in humanity, in mankind. And this is what we're really trying to focus on with you tonight, our own divine potential. And how few people ever realize it or ever know that it exists. There is the potential to be more than what we seem to be, getting and spending, as they say, living a life just based on values and motives and goals in the world. But our own potential is so much more than that. And that's what the great masters come to tell us. If you listen, and I'm sure many of you have frequently listened to Swami's talks, he repeats a phrase over and again. My only purpose in coming is to show you who and what you really are. And we're slumbering, and we begin that spiral staircase of wakefulness. And the times in which we live are, through the pandemic, through all of these things, they tend to draw us into that slumber of unwakefulness, because we're trying to cope. And we've been isolated, we've been withdrawn, we've been afraid, we've been uncertain. We don't know what to believe. And so our energy begins to withdraw. And for all of us as devotees, friends, we have a responsibility. If you're a disciple of this great master, if you're on this path, we have a responsibility. Swami had showed us how to model living a life in challenging times. And it comes back to awakening our own potential, our own energy, our own level of joy, our own ability to serve and give others. And no matter how challenging things become, Master said, every test in life is a test of our willpower. It may look very different. Oh, there's this test and that problem at work and this health challenge and this problem with my family, etc., etc. It's all the same test. It's a test of our willpower. Can I exert enough energy to overcome whatever's coming to me? And we have the tools. Master gave us, from energization to awaken, the prayer at the beginning, Divine Mother, recharge my body with thy cosmic energy. Sometimes I think doing the prayer before energization is equally important to doing the exercises themselves. Awaken within me thy cosmic energy. It's there. Master, you all know he would take a little pinch of his arm, his flesh, and say, there's enough energy in a gram of human flesh to power the city of Chicago for a week. And yet we think we're tired. No, oh, I can't, I'm having so much to do. I can't do it. Some years ago, Swami Kriyananda was living at his geodesic dome at the meditation retreat, for those of you who are familiar with these pieces of property. And he was going to be moving to the Crystal Hermitage dome. And it was just the single dome at that time. And he was always wanting to get on with life. And so the process of doing the interior finishing was going a little slower than he wanted. It needed the finishing touches of painting. And so I was living up at the meditation retreat at the time, and he came into the dining room and he said, is anybody free today? Would you like to help me paint the dome? My dome up at Ananda Village at Crystal Hermitage. And of course, we all had responsibilities, but we just said, oh, yes, Swami, we're free. We'd love to come and help you paint. So we went over and everyone was assigned. And Swami was in vibrant health at that time. He was painting. We were all painting. We started probably about 10 o'clock in the morning. And we painted, and then about, I don't know, 2.5 hours went by, and he said, okay, let's take a break for lunch, 12:30, come back in an hour. And the job I had, the dome had this huge hexagonal picture window overlooking the Yuba River Valley, and it had wooden beams made out of rough lumber, and they were rough wood, which does not absorb paint or stain very well. And so he said they were supposed to be stained with a dark wood stain. So I was up on these little scaffolds, and you had to go over many, many coats because the wood was dry and old and it absorbed the paint and the stain. And so we took a break for lunch. We came back about 2 o'clock. We started again. And everyone was painting. There were probably about a dozen of us, each assigned to a different area. And we painted, and we stained, and we painted. Finally, and time seemed to get away from us, but nobody was tired, so we kept painting. Finally, Swami said, it's been a good day. Why don't we call it a day? And we looked at our watches. 12 hours had gone by. It was 2 in the morning. And it was one of the best instructions, lessons I've ever gotten from him. If you're working with willingness, with enthusiasm, in a spirit of service to others, fatigue doesn't set in. I've never had an experience like that since, but I know that potential is there. It's there if we just say yes, and I can do this. And it was just an extraordinary experience, really. And it was his way, I think, of paying back to us to help him finish the dome. So he gave us that blessing. But it was just such a remarkable experience. And I share that with you because now we're beginning to transition out of the confinement we've had with COVID. God willing, we won't have a big resurgence of the virus in the fall and winter months, but be that as it may. But nevertheless, it feels energetically like we're moving forward. But it's too easy to fall back on old energy patterns now. We have to say, who am I going to be after this? Who do I want to be? Who do I choose to be? Because it's all under our choice. However much energy we have, we choose it. We define it. We say, I have this much energy, or I have this much energy. And that's what Swami was teaching us. You don't know how much energy you have until you just put it out there. And then you'll be amazed the amount that you can accomplish. You know, even in his old age, those of us who were around him a lot, Asha and Shanti and others, his body wasn't well. But he could have all of us running in circles to get things done. He still had that flow and that power of energy. So I say this to all of you because we're at a pivotal time now in your development and in the development of humanity. Really, I think this whole situation came for us to realize our own potential. I can do this. I can do more than I think I can do. And another component in that, of course, is, as Jyotish was saying, enthusiasm, but joy. I was looking at the beautiful quotes from Samadhi that are now illumined thanks to Keshava and his brother Shanti. From joy I came, for joy I live, in sacred joy I melt. We came from joy, and we have the choice, again, the choice to live in joy in every circumstance. Many of you know that in 1976 there was a big forest fire. Ananda was burnt to the ground, Ananda Village, and Swami came. He had been in Hawaii writing the new path, and he came back, and we were all little bit shaken, one might say, to be in a state of shock, let's say that. And Swami came up to me and he just looked at me and he said, "How are you, Devi?" "Well, that's good." And he walked away. He didn't give me any space to have any other thought. It was, again, such a gift. Are you well? Yes, I am well. Are you happy? Yes, I am happy. It's a choice. It's a choice we have, and we can make it under the most adverse circumstances. Once Swami was having a health crisis. He was living in Pune at the time, and he went into kidney failure. And they had to take him to the hospital. It was an emergency, and they had to hook him up to dialysis machines to keep him alive. And we called his nurse, Miriam, from America. We were here. She was with him in the hospital. We said, "How are things going?" And he said, she said, "I'm in Swami's hospital room. Would you like to talk with him?" And we said, "Yes, that would be wonderful." And so he gets on the phone. Here he is. He had just had a brush with death, still hooked up to all these tubes and laying in his bed, connected to the dialysis machine. And he says, "They tell me I look like a plate of pasta with all the tubes all around me." And we just laughed and he laughed. And I thought, just that heaven's laughter. You know, there's a line from Ram and Sita that he who knows heaven's laughter, nothing deterred the joy of his soul. And that was a choice he made long ago in life. And it's a choice we can make. Which of us doesn't have problems in our life? You know, not one of us. Not one of us isn't facing a challenge, big or little. But we have the choice how we respond to it. It's under our control. And if we choose, remember, I came from joy. I live in joy. I will melt in joy and live with that consciousness, especially now. Especially now when people are struggling with depression and addiction and all of these things. Just to simply live in joy and let that be a gift to others. And then finally, what awakens our energy as well, we've been talking about seeing our potential, limitless cosmic energy, choosing to live in joy under all circumstances. You know, I was sharing this story before I move on to the last point. Many of you know Ananda had legal struggles, and when it was all over, and we emerged victorious. When it was all over, we had a celebration at Ananda Village with 3 of the main lawyers who represented us, John Parsons, Rob Christopher, and Rob's assistant. And it was a remarkable experience for many reasons, but for one, all 3 lawyers were crying. And I thought, my gosh, you know, to see one lawyer cry might be a big deal, but all 3 of them. And John Parsons said the most beautiful thing. He was the one who was with us and who wrote The Fight for Religious Freedom. He was with us from the beginning. He said there were so many times where I lost hope. I was so discouraged. I just thought, how can we ever prevail against the immensity of the forces arrayed against us? And he said, I would just come and be with some of you people from Ananda. And he said, I don't know how you did it, but you always found a way to give me hope and joy. And that was living the teachings. It was not easy, but we chose it. We chose it to live in joy. And John was crying and he said, there's no reason why Ananda should still exist. It should have been sold off and rolled up long ago if this lawsuit had gone the way it seemed to go logically. But you all chose to live in joy, to live in faith, with that God would take care of you, and here you all are now. And so if we offer that joy, that hope, that faith into the universe responds positively, and everything works out in ways we could never plan or explain. And so it's like the energy, whatever we put out, the universe matches and enhances that energy whatever joy we put out, the universe enhances and strengthens that energy. It's a beautiful divine dance. And it's all for our, as Master said, education and entertainment, if we can see it that way. And then finally, to awaken our own potential is to give. Give and serve others. This morning, someone told us the most beautiful story, very moving and touching. She was working in a medical profession in the COVID wards in a hospital, just when it was beginning, when we didn't really know, how it was being spread or how contagious it was. Everyone was scared. The patients were scared, the staff was scared, and she went into the room of one of the people who were who had been infected with COVID virus. And she said, at first I was afraid. And then she said, I just prayed. And I was filled with an energy, the woman told us, that I can't explain. But I no longer saw myself as this limited ego and body. I no longer saw the person lying in the bed as separate from me. I felt like I was outside of my body watching. And she said, I went up to that person, this man, and I kind of put my hand on his arm to comfort him. And he was crying. He said, no one has touched me for 1 week. I've just been in this bed. And she just said, would you like me to give you a bed bath? How can I serve you? But she said, from that day till today, I have never been afraid of serving people. So that's one kind of fear. It's infectious disease. But we're all afraid. We're afraid to open up. What if what we give isn't received? What if people don't want it? What if they don't like us? What if they think we're stupid or foolish or anything? But just to give with the thought that by giving, God flows through me. That's the lesson she learned. That was her gift. And she said, I carry it with me today. And so in this time where we're emerging from a dark constraint on our consciousness of humanity globally, in this time to say, what can I do, however unknown it may, or anonymous it might be. People don't have to know that you're helping them. Maybe it's just praying for people that don't even know you're praying for them, that you just, again, Swami would walk up to strangers on the street, and if he saw someone needed energy, he was like his antenna, were always picking up who needed energy. And he would just give them energy, and he would change their lives. In a moment, Jyotish said that he and Swamiji were in New York. They were at a conference that Swami was speaking at in a hotel in New York, in a big convention room in this hotel. But there was a store in the hotel where a man sold electrical equipment, recording equipment. And these were when the little Sony Walkman were just coming out. And so Swami bought, because he wanted people to hear his music at the little booth we had. And so they went into the shop a few times and they bought something, and then the conference was over. And Swami just went in, he had a question about something on the device. And then he mentioned that we're leaving today, and the man started crying. I mean, Swami had met him 3 times about buying a little Walkman. And he said, I feel like I'm losing my best friend. What is that? It's the desire to always be a channel for God's love and friendship and support and hope to others. It's your potential. It's my potential. Don't think it's, well, those guys have been on the path for all this long time. No. If we want to achieve our potential, we have to accept the fact that God can work through us to help others in big and little ways. And so, my friends, energy, raising energy, raising consciousness in these times. It's vitally important, more important than ever. And I just invite you to join together as brothers and sisters. You have a beautiful Sangha here in the Palo Alto area, beautiful community, beautiful school. My goodness, we saw the children playing today. It was wonderful. And contribute, give, help build the community, and use the community. Just coming into this church, I thought, what a lighthouse in the midst of worldly vibrations. It's extraordinary what you all have created here and continue to create and continue to build. Now is the time to take your life and your community, your Sangha, to the next divine level. Awaken your potential. And this is why we have come. No other reason. To discover who and what we really are. So thank you all. God bless you.
Let's just take a moment of silence before we move on. I just can't thank you. I'm nearly certain I'm speaking on behalf of all of us, that I can't thank you enough for coming and being here. You heard Jyotish and Devi say at the beginning of their talk that it's the first time they've been away from the village, so we so deeply appreciate your willingness, your enthusiasm. You were just talking about Swamiji being a channel of God's love and friendship and support. I think those were your exact words. And I was just feeling how deeply that's who you are for us. And the other thought experience that I had is that I just feel like I've spent an evening with Swami Kriyananda. You bring him to us so beautifully. Lakshmi said at the beginning she was introducing you as emissaries of light and love and joy after a lifetime of study with a great master who was the student of great masters. And you, 50 years later, you've succeeded in sharing it here and sharing it all around the world. And I, for one, and I bet many of us, am just eternally grateful. So thank you both so much. Very grateful for your presence in our lives. Jyotish and Devi have been sharing that wisdom, some of which we've heard tonight. The energy is always the same. This was a talk, every other talk, everything they write. They've been writing a blog once a week, sharing just really what they're sharing is what they came to do in this life, but so beautifully sharing the energy of all of the masters with us. I heard Jyotish say sometime, maybe it was during SRW, he said they've never, ever once so it's 8 years now, since 2013, with their weekly blogs, they've never missed a deadline. That's impressive. That's very impressive. So out of that have come now the fourth of these 4 wonderful books. It started with a touch of light, then I think it went on to love, and then joy. And just when we think there's nowhere else to go, comes the fourth book, A Touch of Peace. There are these weekly blogs, little bits, easily digestible with our consciousness, bits of wisdom. Every week, probably many of us read them. So we have these books that we've just received from Crystal Clarity here, and we'd like to take a little time now for anybody who would like to purchase one and come up and let Jyotish and Devi sign your book. We will be doing that. We also have a few copies. I don't know how many, because we didn't think of it soon enough, really, but of the first 3 books. So please, for those of you who feel to purchase a copy and have it signed, we'll bring a table up here and you'll be able to have your own signed copy. Otherwise, everyone else can sit and enjoy the vibration if you feel to, or if you need to leave, you do that. But for those who want to stay a little longer, please do. So.
It really is a joy for us to come down and be with all of you. You know, many of you are just very, very dear friends. And all of you, if you're not already a dear friend, are potentially a dear friend. And so it's really a joy for us to be able to come here and get out of our country bumpkin phase and be able to share again.
So will the table go? You know, Shanti mentioned, well, we're getting, but no, please bring it up. We're stalling. Shanti mentioned that the books have touch of each book is a compilation of 2 years worth of blogs. First one was Touch of Light, Touch of Joy, Touch of Love, Touch of Peace. And I think those of you who know the teachings, there are the 8 aspects of God. And so we've done 4 already, and that's 2 years. So we have 4 more aspects of God, so that's another 8 years. We thought, you know, that's going to time pretty well by the time we were planning to leave the body. So we just keep checking them out till it's done. So, Shanti, my purse, I'll get glasses out. Okay, so are you going to help us, Lakshmi?
Yes.
Okay, what Lakshmi's going to do is you tell her how you like the book signed, because sometimes people, we don't know how to spell their name, or maybe you want it signed to somebody else. So you tell Lakshmi how you want. Oh, okay.
Ananda Prem's going to do that.
Oh, Ananda Prem. Okay, good. So tell her how to tell her how you want the book signed, how you want the name spelled, and then we will sign it for you. And if you would like to leave, please feel free. You don't have to be a captive audience. So.